Who a number of you know, Paul's been a good friend now for 40 years, and put together a presentation on magic mushrooms in British Columbia to celebrate what they've contributed to our culture and in a lot of ways to what other people think about when they think of British Columbia and mushrooms in the same breath. So this presentation is being given by me today, but is actually by me there on the left with a very handsome Cortinarius behind my ear, and Paul Kruger, who I think a number of you know. He's probably of my close friends the one who looks most like a garden gnome. and it's okay, I told him that. And there's a carving, a mushroom chainsaw carving from Masset in Haida, and picking magic mushrooms that was very popular on Haida, this formerly known as the Queen Charlotte Islands, this group of islands off the north coast of British Columbia. You know British Columbia, this is the first time I gave this talk was at the Mushroom Festival in Telluride. It's a very fun mushroom festival where magic mushrooms feature heavily. So I was trying to explain that BC is very large with not a lot of people. And very much like parts of Alberta, you can get into parts of northern British Columbia where there's way more moose than people, right? And by BC's report, Paul Kruger and I and another colleague did for British Columbia. And so we're gonna set up some correspondence about our methodologies and things like that, and with other provinces too. So we have this report available online for anyone who's interested. That's got 3420 species of macrofungi or large fungi or mushrooms if you prefer for British Columbia, and we know, beginning to gather data for the 2025 report, that there's at least a few hundred more that we can add to that list. And we very strongly suspect that there are thousands more, and we just haven't had the opportunity to explore and differentiate. It's still very poorly known in most of the world, really. And of the 3,420 recorded species, a small number of them, like this Liberty Cap mushroom here, are hallucinogenic. And they're the topic of my talk today, which is going to take us, I think, about 45 minutes to 50 minutes, a little bit of time for talk, questions, discussion at the end, and then we'll get on with your natural and cultural history. I'm going to start with the natural history portion and just talk about a number of the magic mushroom species that have been documented for British Columbia. And most of them are in the genus Psilocybe. This is Psilocybe azurescens, which is a species that is almost certainly introduced into southwestern British Columbia. Its native habitat is further south. You can find it growing among driftwood logs and dune grasses near the mouth of the Columbia River, for example. It must have been there when Lewis and Clark made their way to the Pacific Ocean, and may explain some of the confusion in their journals. What is referred to in British Columbia, at least, as wavy caps, is a really common and abundant species. It was actually growing in the gardens at my place for a while, on especially hardwood mulch. Red alder is the most common hardwood mulch that's used on the coast. And this is one that a lot of people cultivate outside. You can grab a handful of bark mulch from a place where they are and put it in your alder bark mulch, and the next year you'll have wavy caps growing there. Of course, picking them or possessing them is against Canadian law, but you could. Mushrooms going back many centuries, several millennia, depending on how you interpret some of the African cave art. But certainly if we're looking at the Codex Maglabeckiano in Central America here, here's a mushroom, here's someone eating the mushroom and being visited by rather a malevolent looking spirit. And it's difficult to even count the people eating mushrooms and seeing strange things in this particular codex here. The Codex Vindobonensis, Mexicanus I, I believe. So there is almost certainly a long history of the use of hallucinogenic mushrooms around the globe, but what really brought it to North American consciousness was a 1957 article by R. Gordon Wasson in Life magazine titled "Seeking the Magic Mushroom." He protested the use of the phrase magic mushroom in the title of this article. Didn't want it characterized as such, but as far as we know, that's the first use of the phrase magic mushrooms, is in this 1957 Life article. Wasson was an amateur ethnopharmacologist, ethnomycologist, who went down to Mexico and found the right people and went through a mushroom ceremony involving these hallucinogenic psilocybe species.